Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled you're joining us today because we've got a pretty fascinating stack of source material to get into.
Yeah, we really do. It's a very rich text.
Right. So today we are looking at this incredibly vibrant, expansive Sunday sermon. It was delivered on May 31st, 2026 at House on the Rock, which you might know as the Rock Cathedral.
Right, and delivered by Pastor Paul Adefarasin.
Exactly. And it actually coincided with Children's Day, which I think adds this really interesting, generational focus to the whole message. The sermon itself is titled Positioned on Purpose.
It is, yeah. It's a very comprehensive teaching. And really, our mission for this deep dive is to distill that core message down for you in a way that's totally clear and accessible.
Make it digestible.
Right. Exactly. We're going to highlight the central spiritual truths he presents, look at the key scriptures he uses to anchor all of that, and, well, most importantly, I think, identify the practical takeaways.
Yeah, the actual homework.
Right, the specific actions and habits he's really calling the listeners to apply to their everyday lives.
Which honestly brings us to the central premise of the teaching. And it is a provocative one. I mean, think about the landscape of your own life for a second. Think about those, annoying delays or the jobs that completely fell through.
Well, we all have those.
Right. Or even just the seemingly random rooms you've ended up sitting in over the years. It's so easy to just view all of that, the struggles and the successes, as this giant game of chance.
Just completely random luck.
Exactly. But what if none of it is random? What if every single one of those, frustrating delays and strange placements is actually part of a highly calculated, totally silent navigation system?
Yeah, and that perspective just fundamentally shifts how a person experiences adversity. I mean, the pastor's central argument here is that in life, very few things are truly accidental.
Very few.
Right. He posits that God doesn't just, call people to a purpose. He strategically and silently positions them, often long before that placement makes any logical sense to them.
Or to anyone around them, honestly. And he frames this whole thing using the acronym GPS God's Positioning System.
I love that analogy.
It's so good. To explain how the system operates, he uses this analogy of a commercial airplane. So imagine a scenario where both pilots in the cockpit have just been completely incapacitated.
Terrifying.
Total nightmare, right. The plane is still flying. The passengers in the back are obviously starting to panic, but there is an air traffic controller on the radio.
Right.
And the controller speaks to the people left in the cockpit and says, hey, do not panic. The airspace is cleared, the flight path is locked in, and I'm going to talk you down on autopilot.
Just follow the instructions.
Exactly. The people in the cockpit don't need to suddenly, learn how to fly a Boeing 747. They just need to sit in the seat and execute what they're told.
And that analogy really highlights the tension between our instinct to, strive and freak out versus the necessity of just listening.
Yeah.
Because in that scenario, if you rely on your own limited aviation knowledge, you're going to crash. You have to surrender to a voice that has a higher vantage point.
You have to trust the controller.
Right. And the pastor actually uses the biblical figure of Job to illustrate this exact feeling of, flying blind. He points to Job chapter 23, verses 8 through 10.
Oh, this part was wild.
Yeah. Job is in a state of total agony, right? Total sensory deprivation. He's lost his family, his wealth, his health. And he says he looks forward, but he can't see God. He looks backward, to the left, to the right, and there's just nothing but complete silence.
He's basically checking all his instruments in the cockpit and getting absolutely zero feedback.
Exactly. But then Job reaches this pivotal conclusion in verse 10. He says, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold."
Wow.
Job deduces that just because he can't see the air traffic controller, it doesn't mean the controller has walked away from the radar screen.
That's a huge shift in mindset.
It is. And the pastor pairs this Old Testament reality with Ephesians 2.9 in the New Testament, which describes humanity as God's masterpiece, created for good works that were literally prearranged before time began.
Okay, so if we accept that the path is prearranged, right, and that there is this ultimate air traffic controller, we really have to look at why that silence is so deeply unsettling for us.
Because it is unsettling.
It's awful. But the source material draws this brilliant parallel to how a literal GPS works in your car. Think about it. If you're driving on a long, straight highway and your next turn isn't for, 50 miles, your GPS doesn't say a word to you.
Right. It's just total silence in the cabin.
Exactly. And the pastor argues that God operates similarly. He only speaks when there is a turn to make or a correction required. We always tend to interpret silence as abandonment, right?
Oh, 100%.
But in the context of a GPS, silence actually means you are exactly on the right path.
And when you do make a mistake, because, we inevitably take the wrong exit or miss a turn, the GPS doesn't scream at you.
It doesn't call you an idiot.
No. It doesn't label you a failure or tell you to just pull over and give up. It simply says, recalculating route. It quietly and instantly adjusts the path to get you back to the final destination based on your new, flawed coordinates. The system just absorbs the mistake.
Which completely reframes our missteps. But transitioning from the theory of all this to the actual lived experience brings us to a much harsher reality, I think.
Yeah, the actual process.
Right. Accepting that this positioning system is at work does not mean the journey is comfortable, at all. In fact, the sermon really emphasizes that the process of being prepared for your purpose is usually excruciating.
It's painful.
Very. And to explain the mechanics of this, the pastor uses the biblical story of Joseph as kind of the ultimate case study. He breaks Joseph's life down into 5 distinct stages, which he calls the 5 Ps.
Yeah, and these 5 stages represent this incredible journey from just a raw, unformed seed to a fully grown tree capable of actually bearing fruit.
Right, so what's the first P?
The first phase is Papa's house. This represents his paternal home. It's the stage of foundational identity formation.
Where he gets the coat.
Exactly. Joseph receives the coat of many colors. He experiences these prophetic dreams, and he's just secure in the knowledge that he is loved and chosen.
But that identity immediately acts as a catalyst for major conflict, right? Which forces him into the second P, which is the pit.
A literal pit.
Yeah, a dry well. His brothers are just fueled by jealousy. They betray him, throw him in there. And the psychological lesson of the pit is realizing that betrayal cannot derail purpose. The pit isn't the end of his story. It's just a harsh transportation mechanism.
And moving him geographically.
Exactly. Moving him away from his comfortable home to the region where his purpose actually awaits.
Which then drops him into the third P, which is Potiphar's house. He is sold into slavery to this high-ranking Egyptian official. But what's interesting is, in this phase, Joseph doesn't wallow in his enslaved status.
He doesn't just give up.
No, instead, he learns management science. He learns the value of strategic, smart work, and eventually he's promoted to run the entire sprawling estate.
Right. He builds up this huge skill set right up until he gets falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, which, of course, drags him down into the fourth P, the prison.
And this isn't just punishment.
Right. The sermon presents the prison as a place of intense psychological conditioning.
Yeah.
In the prison, Joseph has to develop this extreme level of patience. But more importantly, he develops a relational life strategy.
Because he's trapped with people.
Yes. He is forced to interact with the exact people who hold the keys to his future.
And that relational strategy ultimately unlocks the fifth P, the palace. This is where he fulfills his overarching destiny, stepping in as the vice pharaoh of Egypt. He manages a global famine and saves millions of lives, including the brothers who threw him in the pit to begin with.
It's an incredible arc. And to explain how these wildly different, super painful stages actually synthesize into a cohesive destiny, the pastor uses an analogy that really grounds this abstract theology in everyday life.
The cooking analogy.
Yes. He compares this divine preparation to a mother cooking a complex Nigerian soup, which I love. If you look at the raw ingredients in isolation, they are just overwhelming.
Yeah, they don't work on their own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you eat a handful of raw crayfish, it is going to taste terrible. If you try to drink a cup of raw palm oil, your body will literally reject it. A spoonful of raw salt, totally unpalatable.
Every single element is harsh when you experience it on its own.
But the magic happens in the synthesis. When a mother takes those raw, harsh ingredients, puts them into a pot, applies a specific amount of heat and gives it time, those isolated elements undergo a chemical reaction. They meld together to create an absolute masterpiece.
Which is such a vivid picture.
It really is. And the pastor maps this culinary process directly to Romans 8.28, which is that biblical promise that God works all things, the good, the bad, and the ugly together for the ultimate good of those who love him. The heat of the pit and the prison is exactly what cooks the raw ingredients of your life into something valuable.
It's a true synthesis of theology and practical resilience. And it echoes Joseph's own realization in Genesis 50. Verses 18 through 21.
What happens there?
Well, decades after the betrayal, his brothers stand before him and they are terrified of execution. But Joseph tells them, "You intended it for evil, but God meant it for good to save many lives." He recognizes that the brothers were just, the raw crayfish in the soup.
Wow, just an ingredient.
Exactly. And the pastor also introduces this modern metaphor to explain this feeling of delay. The Formula One pit stop.
Oh, let's explore the mechanics of that, because it totally redefines what it means to feel stuck. Think about a Formula One driver. When they're forced to pull off the track and into the pit, it feels like they are losing time.
They're losing the race.
Right. But the pit is not a grave for the car. It is a highly orchestrated 30-second rapid reset. The crew changes the tires, lubricates the engine, checks the telemetry. They make these critical micro adjustments.
It's about maintenance.
The car goes into the pit specifically so it can handle the friction and speed of the next lap without disintegrating. The sermon argues that a pit phase in your life is a divine pit stop designed to build your capacity, not to bury you.
That's powerful.
I do have to jump in here, though, and challenge this framework just a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if we're telling people that their delays, their pits, and their prisons are exactly where they have been positioned by a divine air traffic controller, aren't we risking toxic complacency?
I see what you mean.
Like if someone is sitting in a terrible job or a really stagnant phase of life, telling them, "Oh, it's just a pit stop," sounds like a very dangerous excuse for them to just sit back, accept the misery, and wait passively for a chariot to take them to the palace.
Yeah, and that is the exact trap of misinterpreting the GPS concept. But the source material actually addresses this tension head on.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Yeah.
The difference between being a helpless victim in a pit and being strategically positioned in a pit comes down to what the pastor terms the adaptability quotient.
Adaptability quotient. Okay.
Right. It is absolutely not about passive waiting. The modern cultural instinct is to escape the pit by seeking visibility.
Right.
Right. We want a platform, we want to go viral, we want immediate prominence to prove that we matter.
Everyone wants to be an influencer.
Exactly. But the sermon critiques this obsession heavily.
Right, because visibility without value is hollow. The pastor points out that the greatest figures in biblical history were not seeking a platform at all.
Not a little bit.
Nehemiah wasn't trying to build a massive audience. He was essentially an urban renewalist and an infrastructural developer focused on rebuilding a city's defenses.
Right.
Daniel wasn't trying to be famous. He was this highly educated executive coach and policy advisor to 4 different global emperors. And Esther, she didn't enter a beauty pageant for the fame. She was positioned within the palace architecture to influence government policy and literally prevent a genocide.
They possessed profound value. And the sermon breaks this concept of value creation down into 4 distinct levels, which actually serves as a blueprint for what a person should be doing while they are waiting in that prison phase.
So you don't just wait for the palace.
No, you build your capacity across these 4 tiers.
Let's examine how these levels actually function in practice then. Because this really is the core of the adaptability quotient. The first, foundational level, is implementation.
Right, doing the work.
This is the baseline of just doing physical work. It's executing tasks reliably. If you are told to dig a ditch, you dig that ditch well.
And then the second level scales up to unification. This is essentially management.
Bringing things together.
Exactly. It's the ability to bring disparate people, resources, and processes together to achieve a specific goal. This is what Joseph mastered in Potiphar's house. He didn't just, sweep the floors. He unified the entire estate's operations.
Okay, and then the third level is communication. This requires the ability to articulate vision, mediate conflict, and strategically convey ideas so that organizations can actually move forward.
But the fourth tier, the highest level of value creation, is what he calls imagination.
Which isn't just daydreaming, right?
No, not at all. Imagination, in this context, is the rare ability to look into the abstract future, identify a solution to a problem that hasn't even happened yet, and then pull that solution into reality.
That is exactly the defining characteristic of Joseph's rise to power. When Pharaoh had that confusing dream about the fat and skinny cows, Joseph didn't just offer sympathy.
Oh, that sounds stressful.
Well, he didn't do that. He used imagination to abstract the future. He foresaw a massive regional famine, and then he immediately drafted a 7-year national agricultural storage plan to mitigate it.
He solved the problem.
Yes, and the principle here is foundational. You do not chase money, and you do not chase platforms. You build deep, undeniable value across those 4 levels. If your value is high enough, the platform will eventually require you.
Which leads directly to the practical homework assignment the pastor gives the congregation. Because knowing the theory of the 4 levels of value is great, but how do you actually execute this on, like, a random Tuesday when you feel completely overlooked?
That is the big question.
The specific action he calls his listeners to apply is building a relational life strategy.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, this requires a real audit of your daily habits. A relational life strategy means you stop just drifting through your social and professional networks. The pastor urges the listeners to practice intentional conflict management.
Ensuring relationships actually survive.
Exactly. Ensuring they can withstand the stress of difficult times rather than just fracturing at the very first sign of friction.
And he illustrates this perfectly by looking at Joseph's behavior while he was at his absolute lowest point in the prison. So Joseph is locked in a dungeon, completely forgotten. 2 former royal officials, the king's butler and baker, are thrown into the same prison.
Joseph could have easily ignored them.
Easily. He's got his own problems. Instead, he notices they look depressed. He actively initiates a conversation to find out what's wrong, and he uses his specific gift to interpret their dreams.
He solved a problem for someone else while he was sitting in his own mess.
Yes, that interaction is the crux of a relational life strategy. Joseph recognized that he could not afford to withhold his value just because his environment was unfair.
That's such a good point.
You have to be kind to everyone, sure, but you must strategically invest in the people who might be tied to your destiny. You celebrate their successes, you support them in their failures, and you offer your highest value without demanding some immediate return on investment.
And, the return on investment for Joseph was certainly not immediate.
Oh, not at all.
The text points out that after the butler is restored to his position in the palace, he completely forgets about Joseph for 2 full years.
2 years of absolute silence on the GPS.
But when the moment of crisis finally arrived, when Pharaoh had a problem that no one in his cabinet could solve, that single relationship was the bridge.
The butler remembered.
Yes, he remembered the value Joseph provided in the prison. And that connection pulled Joseph from a dungeon to the second highest seat of global power in a single afternoon.
It's mind-blowing when you frame it like that. The sermon then takes this entire framework, the pain of the pit, the building of value, the relational strategy, and scales it up to a massive macro level.
Yeah, this isn't just about individual success.
Right. It's not just a self-help guide for your career. The pastor applies the spiritual principle of positioning to the economic trajectory of an entire continent.
Now, to be clear, as always on the Deep Dive, we want to remind you that we aren't here to endorse any specific political or economic claims made in the source material.
Right. We stay neutral on that.
Exactly. We're just looking at how the pastor uses these figures to illustrate his spiritual framework. So he cites estimates suggesting that Nigeria sits on 175 to 210 trillion cubic meters of gas.
Which is staggering.
It is. He values that at roughly $900 trillion.
So, based on those immense resource numbers, the pastor argues that the severe poverty experienced by 70% of the citizens is fundamentally unnecessary.
It's an issue of management.
Yes. He links the biblical model of Joseph directly to modern infrastructural and economic leadership. The poverty exists, he argues, not because of a lack of resources, but because of a lack of righteous, value-driven leadership at the highest levels of influence.
And that's the point of the preparation. The overarching goal of enduring the pit and developing that extreme adaptability quotient is not so you can acquire a luxury vehicle or just live a comfortable life.
It's not about you.
Right. The purpose is to be positioned to take management of the resources so that the underserved populations can actually get access to education, reliable electricity, and functioning infrastructure.
The pastor challenges his listeners to view their ambition through the lens of national impact. He literally calls the congregation to pray for the pharaohs of Africa, meaning the current political and corporate leaders to be surrounded by righteous, highly skilled advisors.
He is casting a vision for the church to function as an incubator.
Like a training ground.
Exactly. For the next generation of urban renewalists, policy advisors, and economic strategists, he wants a congregation full of Nehemiahs, Esthers, and Josephs.
People who have survived the heat of the soup.
People who have built up their value from implementation all the way to imagination and are actually prepared to step into the rooms of power to change the system from the inside out.
It's just a profound reframing of delays and difficulties. It suggests that if you are currently waiting, you are likely in a period of intense preparation.
A true Joseph doesn't need to sit on the throne to transform a nation.
Wow.
They just need the strategic capacity to manage the resources and, the ear of the leadership. It is entirely about leveraging your positioning for the collective good rather than just personal glory.
Which brings us to the core takeaway for you, the listener. Being positioned on purpose requires a radical shift in how you interpret the silence and the setbacks in your life.
You have to rethink it all.
You really do. It means recognizing that the pit you might be in right now is just a rapid reset. It's a Formula One pit stop designed to build your resilience. It means committing to building undeniable value rather than just chasing superficial visibility.
And it requires intentionally nurturing your relationships, knowing that your purpose is always connected to serving others.
The heat you're experiencing right now is simply turning the raw, uncomfortable ingredients of your current situation into something of immense, lasting value.
It's cooking the soup.
It's cooking the soup. So let's return to that opening thought as we wrap up. What if the frustrating room you find yourself stuck in right now isn't an accident at all?
It's a GPS coordinate.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final, provocative question to chew on today. If you feel like you are currently trapped in the prison phase of your own life's 5 Ps, if you feel overlooked, delayed, or entirely forgotten, take a close look around that room.
Who's in there with you?
Right. Who are the butlers and bakers sitting right next to you right now? Whose problems could you solve today using the value you already possess, which might unknowingly unlock the doors to your own palace tomorrow?
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.